A scientist struggles to physically and mentally survive an apocalyptic landscape where plague-induced vampires force him to barricade himself each night. This is the premise of the 1964 film The Last Man on Earth, based on Richard Matheson's 1954 novel I Am Legend. And it's the film Ryan and I are staking out this week on Movie Bones. You know, Ryan, I was looking through some of the critical reactions to the original source novel of today's movie, and there's something about both the original text and this movie today that I think makes me understand a little bit better why this particular story keeps getting remade, and also why it feels a little bit like missed potential kind of every time. But first, let's recap the basic plot for the folks out there. The story today centers on Dr. Robert Morgan, who is the only apparent survivor of a massed pandemic that turns the living into what is in every way, like to our cultural awareness, a vampire, although he himself seems immune to the disease. Every day he goes about a kind of a gruesome checklist of chores involving restocking supplies, clearing the street of the dead, and disposing of them in a burn pit, making fresh stakes to kill more of the vampires at night when they attack, and so on and so forth. He continues this way every day. This is like his daily routine every day, and it kind of gradually works away at his sanity, which is slipping away until one day he meets a woman who is also walking around, in pure daylight, the only other person he's ever seen. And from there, we kind of get into spoiler territory, but I want to warn the folks out there that today's episode is going to be spoiler heavy because kind of like the most we want to say about this movie has to do with the ending, and it's just unavoidable. And not just to this translation of the film itself, but to the source material, to all the iterations of this film that came after it based on the same novel. It's just central to the whole thing. So folks out there, be aware. Just watch the film first if you really care about these things. So what's your first impressions of the film?
You want to talk about spoilers?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. This is funny to me. And it's funny to me in a way that the movie can't help that it did this. But if I'm going in blind to this movie, if I don't know anything about the book, if I don't know anything about any other part of the movie, title screen comes up, Last Man on Earth, then we go right into the credits, and it says, starring Vincent Price, and then co-starring. And I'm like, I don't know. That almost took me out of the whole entire film. I was like, well, okay.
Well, I mean,
clearly he's not the last man on Earth.
Well, I mean, if you're familiar with the story at all, it's like, yeah, there has to be some other kind of, you want to say actors involved. I mean, but it still seemed like a rather long list for such a, an isolated kind of film, right? I can think of like at least two people that have to be in it based on the story. If you're going to be close to it at all, it's going to require at least two people on screen. And, after that, you could have more or less depending on, what you do with flashbacks and whatnot. But I was actually more distracted. Or actually, this looks more like Italian cinema, really, because I think based on the names and the location, it looks more like an Italian city. And the names kind of imply that, too. So I think this is more of an Italian film, if I'm just going based on my gut feeling here. But
yeah, real quick, you were actually correct. The shooting took place primarily in Italy. Predominantly in Italy, and everybody on the cast besides
Vincent Price
is, I believe, is definitely Italian. Which that makes much more sense because another movie that famously does this is Fistful of Dollars. Because I was in there yesterday going, it looked like the dub was a little bit messed up to me, and I say dub, not an actual like they're dubbing over other languages, but I was like, man, something's amiss here. And that's why. It's because most of the actors, minus Vincent Price, are speaking Italian.
Yeah.
So they're dubbing over them with probably their own voices. But
yeah. It does jibe with a lot of the. I guess Italy must have had a really good, incentive program for people to film in their country because this happened a lot. I know in the '60s, and the idea is apparently to get one big name American actor, whether it's Clint Eastwood. I'm not sure if he was as big a name actor in Hollywood before he did the Fistful of Dollars.
That's what kicked off his career.
Yeah. It was, so it's like, at least, but you have to have like this American actor draw, right? Someone who was actually an American. And then you have, the rest of the supporting cast can be filled out with Italian extras, right? And it seemed to be like, at least I'm getting a vibe here is what I'm saying. It probably was done for economic reasons, and I can understand doing that. I mean, it doesn't hurt the film that way per se. What really kind of took me out of the film more in terms of, and this has to do with modern trends, because I believe the original film must have been done in black and white, because people didn't start colorizing film at least until like the 80s and 90s, I think.
Oh, are you about to say the same thing that I've been feeling as well?
Oh yeah, because this is one of the bad things. This is
Yeah.
where, and it has nothing to do with the original shoot, because I'm sure that was originally black and white. But colorizing, folks, man, I'm telling you, I've rarely ever seen it done well. And here is like, it really is bad, because sometimes I can't tell is like if the person's actually turning into a zombie just because the color is being drained to their face in a moment where like this is a lapse. The guy got lazy. Whoever did the colorizing got lazy, and it's like, he's dead now. No, that's just the colorizer, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. In fact, folks, if you're going to go watch this movie, make sure it's in the black and white version.
Yeah. Don't make the same mistake we did.
I think Tubi has the black and white version.
They do. I'm not sure why we didn't go with it. They're all identical, apparently. So
yeah.
Just lazy. Yeah, we got lazy too, folks. So we just picked it at random, I guess. Any case, we didn't do our homework on that one. I mean, in the original film, so anyway, if you don't count that as a special effect, and I don't count that against the movie itself, there are actually some pretty good special effects in the film. I did notice that, when Morgan, he's hauling around the dead bodies, he's cleaning up the dead bodies off the street. If that's an actor doing the dead body, and it did look like it could be an actual actor just being limp, they did a pretty good job of appearing dead. I mean, that's not easy to do all the time. You see a lot of movies, especially from that era, where it's like, there's like, oh, that person's not really dead. He's like, look, and it doesn't have to do with the fact of just being limp. It's just something about being dead weight, which is hard to convey on film. But they managed to do it here, whether it was a dummy or if it was actual just people playing dead. I thought that was really kind of neat. That was one of the things I did notice.
Folks, I'm not going to lie to y'all. I'm having a hard time because I don't want to eviscerate this movie. Like, I'm fighting myself on doing that kind of thing right now. One of my biggest issues with the film is, I would say, the lack. I don't like this in any story. I want to make that very clear. Now, I understand this is a part of stories, and sometimes this is what drives stories. But this plot is resolved so easily if there's like simple conversations with one another. And that's kind of one of the things that makes me mad about it. Folks, if you don't know, the end of the movie is that he learns that there's been a whole new society that has been created. So you have like 3 different types of people in this film. You have Vincent Price's character, who is normal. You have, what was her character's name? Was it Lucy?
Was it? No, it began with an R. Ruth, was it? I think it was Ruth.
Yeah, let's just call her Ruth. You have Ruth's character. She's one of the, let's call them evolved. That's really what I think it's trying to push on us, is that these are evolved people. This virus evolved them. And then you have like this third in between character, and it's not a character itself, but like group of people who are zombified in a sense. The zombie versions of the characters, or the zombie-ish versions of the characters, they still are able to talk. They still, like, they're pretty cognizant. But like I said, you learn that there's like an advanced version, and then there's Vincent's personhood, and the plot resolves around, Ruth comes to him, and he figures out she's actually one of them, and she's like, hey, they're coming to kill you, and he's like, his response is, I didn't even know this was like a thing. I did not realize that y'all were a new society. And I don't know. I understand that he had done all the things that he had done.
Yeah.
But I'm like, why would you not give someone a pass? Because he didn't know.
I understand, because at least the way the book portrays it, at least the way I've come to understand it, is that it's very hard to reconcile this one dude who's been killing you all night after night and just have one person turn it all around. I kind of get that. It goes with the mob mentality thing. And since that still kind of applies to the new race of people as well as to the old one, what I don't understand is it all just happened so quickly. There's no time for reflection on Vincent Price's character's behalf, because he's, from one moment to the next, he's talking about, you guys are freaks. He, in one moment in breath, he's saying they're all freaks. And the next moment, he's lamenting that they were afraid of me. And that's quite a mood swing to go from, basically condemning them all as being subhuman to they actually have rights and feelings, and I hurt them. It's just a huge mood swing to go within the space of a couple different lines. And then, of course, they kill him right there without a trial. And that's the thing the book had. The idea was that she was there to lure him out, to bring him, to detain him, and then bring him to some kind of trial, I guess, some kind of formal judgment that isn't just summary execution. And although that doesn't stop him from going through with it, it does give him time to reflect on the meaning of all this and how he is now that, he treated them like the monsters and now they're treating him like the monster. He is the I Am Legend of the title. That's what kind of makes it so kind of like that Twilight Zone ending for the good episodes of Twilight Zone that kind of really sticks with you, if you've got that moment of reflection. And it's just absent here. You know what I mean?
But I'd like to know how long it was in the book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because in the movie tells us, it's direct with us. It says it's been 3 years. And I'm sitting there thinking, also when it says 3 years, I'm like, so it's not been very long since this happened. 3 years is not a long time. I mean, it feels like a long time, but it's not a long time. It's, you who are listening to this today, you remember, let's talk about airborne illnesses. You remember what it was like in 2020. That's 4 years ago. And so I'm sitting there thinking, this has only been 3 years. And it's like, their society has changed so much. I mean, again, you're almost sitting there thinking yeah, you kind of deserve a free pass because I was freaked out.
Yeah.
I'd be talking like that. I'm acting like I'm a person in the book. I probably could sit there and reason out. I was freaked out when all this started happening.
That's true. You're right, because it doesn't indicate that these people had their memory wiped when they evolved into these new beings, And so maybe you're right. 3 years should at least ingrain some kind of empathy for the guy, at least some level of understanding. There were some other problems with the time frame, though. It's like, and this is more of a technical level, but you see him going around to shopping stores that are empty. But he's getting garlic out of a refrigerator 3 years later, and even refrigerated garlic would be growing sprouts and then dying, and after
that's actually something my wife brought up. We were watching it together. And her response, she wasn't really questioning why he was buying garlic, but her question was, why isn't he not growing the garlic?
Yes, this is the same question my wife and I had when we were watching it too. It was like, you should be growing this stuff out of your backyard. You should have a garden full of nothing but garlic. Okay, dude.
Yeah.
That was another thing that you pick up on. I mean, it's a mixed bag because, Vincent Price is doing a pretty good job of conveying someone in that state, right? Overall, he sells you on it,
Yeah, there's some other issues that I have. I'm going to chalk this up to budget. Part of his defense, his home defense, is the garlic on the door and also the window or the mirror on the door. And the mirror on the door is a vampire trope. They don't want to go in because they can't see themselves, blah, blah, blah. But it's just the front door. That's it. That's just the front door.
The windows,
The windows, these people, and I'm serious when I say this, the monster versions of these people are quite adept. I'm not kidding you when I say that they can do things. They're not just monsters. They have, abilities. They take his car apart.
Yeah. They still
piece
have...
by piece.
And these are the dead ones, folks. These are the actual dead vampires as opposed to the live vampires. I know it's weird to have this distinction, but yeah.
And when I saw that, I'm sitting there going, how can they not get through the window? And they're banging on the windows the whole entire time as well.
Yeah. And here's it. Okay, we're working our way into all these questions. And why is this written to make this virus so specific to follow so many of the vampire tropes? I understand you could easily probably take a few, like the blood sucking or the need for blood would be one that you could see having maybe a medical kind of biological component to that where you could simulate that, and maybe even something for garlic. I don't know why, but at least you could maybe figuratively think of something that could reason that could, yes, science-y type stuff for the purposes of a story, right? But then you get into the crosses and you get into the mirrors, and it starts to get a little bit hazier as to why all of these things fit so well into the tropes. And I went back and I looked into, and it's like the book apparently had these too. And one of the criticisms of the book, the main character is a scientist, he goes through and he starts to try and figure out why all these, and he rationalizes every single one of the old vampire tropes. Not all of them, though. I just thought of one even just now. It's like there's one they didn't do, and it's like don't vampires have to be invited into your home to be able to come into your home? Already, if you're going to sacrifice that vampire trope, why not cut it back to the point where it's at least more plausible? Because it feels too forced, you know. And I know the end of the book has to do with the fact that we had vampires as our, you know, legends, and now the tables are turned. You don't have to make it that literal, though. I don't think. You know what I mean? And that bothered
You
me.
could have created something on its own.
Yes, you could have created something on its own. You could have
Yeah.
gone with a different monster, maybe like a werewolf, a mutation, you know, something like that.
Or just like, you know, I wouldn't say I don't want this to come across, because I agree with what you're saying. I don't want this to contradict what you're saying. But or you take it in such a route that it's like maybe there's like a section of the book he's trying to figure out, why do all of these things match up with them, with like how to ward off vampires when they're
Yeah.
not actually vampires.
You only put into a story how much you need to accurately tell to convincingly portray a story, right? To keep you sucked into it. Because after a certain point, it becomes less to your benefit and more to your detriment as a storyteller to have to explain. And this is why the mirrors are like are like vampires, and this is why, you know, the garlic is like vampires, and this is why X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, you don't have to go through every one of them.
Yeah, I agree.
I could have given this movie, you know, a much higher rating if it was just not for that third act, you know. Yeah, I could have even overlooked a lot of the stuff we're talking about when it comes to, like, you know, all the vampire cliches and having to justify each one of them, because there was still kind of that emotional connection to Vincent Price's character. So anyway, it was frustrating for both of us. Oh man, did you notice that there are some aspects of the script that didn't seem to line up chronologically into the time period? Like, they've got these scientists, and actually Morgan, Vincent Price's Morgan, he's displaying a huge amount of skepticism over the point of the disease being airborne, as if that was such a unrealistic thing you could imagine, as a disease being airborne. And to me, it's like that was a thing back then too, wasn't it? It was, even among the non-scientisty type people at that time, still understood that, you know, you can get colds and viruses through the air. So why would this be so? No, of course not. Not that. I can't imagine that. It's like, that took me out of it for a moment too. It's like there was little things like that. It just didn't entirely make sense too.
This film might have benefited from like an extra 20 minutes, so we get some extra like explanations on stuff. Also, and again, I understand like the root of the story itself, and that is, you know, this isolation, and you're trying to figure out sort of like, why has this happened, and, you know, you're following this man, and then there's a twist at the end. But this is the type of story that if you're going to redo it, or if you're going to work on it a little bit, because I don't think he did I don't think there was a sequel to this book at all. What I would want is a movie or a book, maybe a movie too, but a book that focuses on the other part of the world. I think you could have even written this book in such a way, if you wanted to, that you're focusing on two characters. They're in separate locations and they're destined to meet one another. One of them is the vampire-like creature person. The other one is Vincent Price's like person, or the main character. And they don't know anything. You know, one knows about the other one, but the other one doesn't know about. And, you know, you could like, or is he ever going to figure it out? It didn't have to be a twist. It doesn't have to be a twist.
It doesn't have to be a twist. No.
Yeah. Because, I mean, again, you know, those type of stories as well work just as well. And again, it's just like we get to this point, it's like, oh, there's a twist. I don't know. It just kind of falls short. I need to read the book. I know I need to read the book and get my own, like, that'll greatly enhance my opinion on this whole entire story itself. It's a very short book too. It's only 160 pages. So
okay, and it's worth picking up, I suppose. It's worth picking up, you know?
Yeah.
So Ryan, I mean, where does that leave you? I mean, where does it leave you on the verdict, man?
Okay, so I always give movies that are based off of books some benefit of the doubt. So we're not nuking the fridge. That's what we're not going to do. I would give this a bad dates. And the reason why is because if you read the book and you like the book, I always encourage people, and I've done it before here, if you know the story, if you've only read the book, go look at the media that has spawned from that book. So bad dates. Other than that, and like I said, in our bad dates, it's one kind of done ordeal. Honestly, if I'm going to tell you to go watch anything based off of this book, I'm going to tell you to watch I Am Legend with the second ending, because there's a second ending to I Am Legend where he kind of realized, or he's kind of shown what happens. And if you're going to want to watch a movie that's based off of this, there's other movies. They're not as, like Justin's already said, sometimes this movie just doesn't seem to work like you want it to. The Omega Man is not good.
I have not seen the Omega Man. I know all I know about it is stars Charlton Heston, and the trailer makes it looks like it's not worth giving a shot. But
I was looking at the reviews, and they're like, no, this one's not good. And also, while this is not, it's not based off of it, it's inspired by it. Probably the better movie, Night of the Living Dead.
Well, yeah. I mean, that is a classic, but that's a whole separate consideration. As for me, I really wish they'd stuck to the landing on this one, man. That would have made all the difference to me, being aware of the novel's ending, and of course. The acting was good enough that the problems before the ending were small enough I was prepared to go perhaps as high as a trust me even. But with the ending as it was, it's especially true that it needed to land it in a movie like this, when there's so much is riding on that ending. I can't give it more than bad dates. There were a number of elements that are all worth watching once here, and we mentioned them early on, and Ryan, you mentioned several of them. The special effects, the atmosphere, Vincent Price doing a pretty good job holding the screen all by himself, pretty much, for a good chunk of the film, and never getting tired of watching him, be the only person there. Even if the narration didn't distract too much. But mostly I'm left with a feeling of disappointment. I'm just really disappointed with this, and for that, I really can't see myself watching it again. So this is the part of the show now where we like to remind all the good folks out there that if you're enjoying our shared journey in discovering older films, go ahead and feel free to express it using the tools social media and the internet have graced us with. Like, subscribe, comment, and of course, follow us on your favorite podcast purveyor of choice, so you can always keep up to date with each week's viewing assignment. And on that note, Ryan, it's something a bit bigger on next week's Characters' Minds, isn't it?
Folks, we are going to be watching not just a king, but a god. A god that rises up from the seas and takes out Tokyo.
Can you guess it, folks? I mean, if you want to go based on how many films have been made off of the original, this one puts I Am Legend to shame, okay? It's
Godzilla, or otherwise known as Gojira.
You're the expert on that. You're going to have a lot to say, and I'm just going to sit back and listen, because I am not an expert.
That's great.
I guess that's about all there is to say, except have a good week, folks. And Ryan, I'll see you next week.
See you next week.
All right, folks. Bye-bye.